those of people who signed in early, we've been doing a little exercise, so let me repeat that so everybody can take part. So what I'd like you to do, and this is for you only, but it's a way of framing your thinking for the rest of the webinar, is take a piece of paper and put a horizontal line across the middle. And above the line, please write down the type of emotions you have on a good day. And the behaviors that go with those emotions. So when you get up in the morning and you think, gosh, this is going to be a good day, what are the emotions that you're feeling and the type of behaviors that you then exhibit during that day? And when you've done that, just pick 3. It doesn't have to be more than that. When you've done that, please, in the bottom half of the paper, below the horizontal line, write down the type of emotions you have on a bad day and the types of behaviors that you exhibit. So again, just pick 3. And I'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that. Well, not even a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds to do that, and then we'll get started. So good morning to David. Lovely to have you on, David. So the point of this exercise is really to get you thinking about the differences and in terms of how you feel and how that creates different behavior. So I think while people are doing that, let me just say who Head, Heart and Brain are. So we've got Lindsay on the line and we will have Sarah on the line, who's 2 of my colleagues in the business. And we work with organizations really in leadership development and business policy. So looking at some of the processes and practices organizations are using and how those can be informed by understanding the research that's coming out of neuroscience about how our brain works and how we can be more effective at work. The head and the heart bit are about the rational business content for the head and the emotional engagement for the heart. So there's lots more about us on our website if you are interested. So let's talk about emotions. So hopefully most of you will have done that little exercise. And here's some of the emotions on the top of the page that you may have written down. And on the bottom of this little diagram, some of the ones that might be at the bottom of your page. But I think the important thing to be thinking about is when you're experiencing those emotions, how do you behave? And how does that behavior then set you up for what you're doing and how you're acting at work and with your colleagues? So a brief poll here. Liz, can we have this poll over? So what are the dominant emotions in your organization? So taking this from you to your organization. Are they mainly fear or threat, mainly positive, or about the same across those 2 different types of emotions? We've got people voting here. Very pleasing to see. Most people are saying mainly positive, which is great. So for an overwhelming number of people, something like 72%, the emotions in their organization are mainly positive, which is really good to see. So just keep that in mind as we go through the rest of this content and what having those positive emotions may be doing for you. So we know that we scan actually not for positive emotions, but for negative emotions, and this is really a survival mechanism. So the neuroscientist Evian Gordon has estimated that we probably scan and notice things that are threatening to us, that create negative emotions, probably 3 to 5 times more than positive. And there's been an awful lot written about the impact of experiencing those negative emotions and how it can make us behave. So we know that they make us take a much more narrower view of the world, and to be more kind of hesitant about what we do, to be more resistant to change, and to be more concerned about whether the people we're meeting are friend or foe. There's also some evidence that it makes us much more kind of inclined to put the barriers up, if you like, and stay close to the people we know and trust, and be much more suspicious of new people or people who are slightly different to us. So, you know, whatever you put in your little exercise, some of the things that you may have been writing down there were, you know, that kind of concern about your own safety, a cautiousness about other people, and a narrowing of your worldview.
Okay, Jan, I'm just going to mute everybody if that's all right, to just rid of the interference. So just bear with me a second, everybody, because
Sure.
there's quite a bit going on. Just a second. Okay, you're back.
Yeah, so I notice here Angela saying emotions are related to many things. It also depends on the organisation and who we are. And of course, you will bring your emotions to work with you. They're not sealed up. And that's something that can make your day good or bad. And sort of, so I think what the science is saying is we kind of have an underlying baseline. At one time, that it was believed that you were either born positive or negative. That's pretty much been overcome with more newer research that says how we feel about things is a function of how we interact with the world rather than something that's sort of genetically predetermined. But obviously what goes on in your world can impact. But at a bottom line, you'll always have a slight negativity bias because you'll be scanning for those things that might be a threat to you. And in the modern world, that's obviously not snakes and tigers, but it is, you know, the boss frowning. It is the performance rating that's lower than you anticipated it being, and things like this. So, you know, take that as the baseline, and part of what the research around positivity is encouraging us to do is take more notice of those positive emotions, because they can, you know, they can be something that we get out of the habit of noticing. So more about that in a minute. So the most prevalent work in this area has been done by a lady called Barbara Fredrickson, who's at, I think it's called Chapel Hill, the university she's at in North Carolina. And she's been studying positive emotions for many, many years. She's a social psychologist. And she has created this theory that she calls broaden and build. And most of her research has been, or at least her research up until very recently, has been about why do we have positive emotions in the first place? What's their purpose? And then secondly, what happens when we experience positive emotions? So what she's saying is, first of all, you need to make a conscious effort to notice positive emotions, to tip the negative bias, if you like. And once you start noticing those, then they begin to build up and they broaden your awareness of the world. So she believes that positive emotions exist so that we connect more with other people, and so that we're much more open to learning and by implication to change. So her research tends to show that people who are in a positive mood, even in situations where they've been asked to watch a funny video, for example, before carrying out a task in a lab experiment, those people are more likely to notice the broader aspects of the task and to make connections across quite sort of disparate pieces of information. And we've got Jude saying here, emotional contagion can also influence our behaviours. Absolutely. So part of what we know from this research is the way we feel tends to impact how other people feel. And particularly how leaders are, we kind of read the signals. So if your boss comes in looking grumpy in the morning, or is only mentioning what's wrong with a project, for example, that will impact your own mood and subsequently your behaviours. The other thing that Barbara Fredrickson talks about is those positive emotions tend to come with much weaker, what she calls action urges. So one of the reasons I got you to write down what are the behaviours that you tend to experience with positive emotions is for some people that can be quite a hard thing to do. So I'd be quite interested in the chat box who found it hard to recognise what the behaviours are when you're in a positive mood. We did this at a presentation I was doing yesterday for the CIPD, and there was a couple of people who were completely stuck on being able to identify what the behaviours were, because those action urges, as the jargon calls it, are much less defined than the action urges when we're in a negative mood, when we're in a threat situation, for example. Yeah, so we've got some people here saying it is more difficult to notice those. And we've also got Helen saying people with strengths around empathy may then have to work harder to remain positive as they take on the negative from other people. That's true. But empathy is one of the things that being in a positive mood is one of the emotions or one of the skills that we're much more likely to be able to experience. So we've got Emily. Hi, Emily. Lovely to have you on the line from Australia. It was more difficult, she's saying, it was more difficult with the positive emotions, but I found that it was the difference between being collaborative and wanting to be alone, isolated. Yeah, I think that's a very common experience. And I think that goes to Barbara Fredrickson's research, that when we're in a positive mood, we're much likely to reach out to other people. When we're in a negative mood, our worldview narrows and we're much more likely to have the barriers up and to keep ourselves to ourselves. So the other thing Barbara Fredrickson does, and she quite often uses analogies with food. So she talks about you need your 5 a day. So she talks about, as with green vegetables, we know that eating greens once a week or once a month is not really going to do our health that much good. But if we have our 5 a day, we kind of build up a resilience and a resistance to, in this case, ill health. And she's saying the same with positive emotions. If we make a positive effort to notice them and to build upon them, to savor them, then we get an accumulative positive effect. And that accumulative positive effect is also a major part of resilience. So people who are very resilient, who are able to overcome difficulties, are people who tend to be optimistic and who tend to notice the positive in the world. And Jude is saying we're also more familiar with our negative habits and behaviours. Noticing our positive traits requires more self-awareness and to kind of positively build those habits. That's absolutely true. So some of the advice that's given around building and savoring those positive emotions, we'll talk about in a minute, but let's just do a little poll about how you think you're doing on your 5 a day. So how are you doing on your 5 a day? Are you good? You definitely notice and savor the positive events, emotions, and make a point of this. Not bad, you notice and savor, but you know you could do better. Not so good, and I've never thought about doing this before. Okay, so most people saying about not bad. A few people saying they've never really thought about it before. Okay, so we're doing quite well here. Most people are saying they're not bad at it. They do notice and savor, but they could do it a bit more. So some of the ways in which you can do that a bit more, one of the most useful ways of doing that is to journal. So to actually, pick a time of the day where you're going to actually write down all the positive things that happened to you that day, or the positive things that you experienced and noticed. And they don't have to be massive things. So I mentioned very early on, it's an absolutely glorious sunny day here in East London. That will be one of my positives today. And just noticing that, sets me up for having a better day. It sets me up with a positive frame of mind about the day rather than what might be a negative one. So someone's asking, could these be built into a gratitude list in the evening? And yes, I think that's absolutely the sorts of things we're talking about. So the other way that you can help yourself notice more of the positive is something like a gratitude list, or just make a list at the end of the day of all the positive things that have happened to you. If you haven't got a formal journal, then before you go to sleep, just run through those almost as a meditation in your mind, and remember and savor, really re-experience those positive things. And I think the other thing that can be really kind of helpful is to do that when you've had a negative experience. So we've got Abigail here saying, yesterday when it rained a lot, there were several arguments on the train. I bet there are a lot less today. It's so sunny. What a lovely thought. Well, let's hope so. Someone here recommending a book to read. So just notice that, and maybe we can put that in the links. So it's called The Secret. And Haley saying it's all about, oh God, I've lost my screen, training your brain to notice the positives. That's absolutely what we're saying here. And it can take a little bit of effort. So you've got to set out, and have a goal about doing this, and really be determined to overcome those habits of noticing the negative. And if you work in a big organization, you'll see how organizations are actually set up to notice the negative. And I don't think anyone kind of did that in a malicious way, but all the things around contingency planning and post-project reviews tend to look at what went wrong rather than what went right. So I think one of the things you can do with your own group is to, again, tip that balance and look at things like, what was our learning today, or what was our learning from this project? What are the things that went really well, and how can we make sure we build those into future projects? Now, what Barbara Fredrickson talks about is actually a positivity ratio. So she's done lots of research, some of this early research with a colleague whose name escapes me at the moment, but is in our links. And what they looked at was some maths, basically, that where they looked at all the positive things that happened with the group, and the initial research was done with leadership groups, and looked at the results those groups got. So kind of what was the kind of share price of the company, what was the return on investment, those sorts of results. And they came up with this 3-to-1 ratio. So what Fredrickson says is you need 3 positive experiences for every 1 negative experience. And she talks about you need the negativity to stay true to the world. So she particularly talks about being positive isn't about going around pretending everything is good. It's dealing with what's going on in the world as a reality, but not letting it take over your life. So not letting it impact your resilience, for example. And the negative piece keeps us real, I guess. Now, there's a lot of question about whether the actual maths that they used is correct, and there's a rather kind of scathing article saying everything Barbara Fredrickson did is wrong. I think if you read that article, it is quite biased itself and quite negative. And we'll put the link up to that in case people do want to read it. But basically what Fredrickson has come back and done is look at this 3-to-1 ratio across many, many other situations. So people in business, people in teams, people, and also around health. And this 3-to-1 ratio tends to hold up. She also has provided a quite interesting positivity test, self-test, that you can do, and we'll put the link up for that. Now, I have to admit, when I did it, I was quite shocked because my ratio was way down. So a word of warning, you need to do it over a period of time. Don't just pick one day. So do it over a period of time, and then look at what your kind of average rating or ratio is over that period of time. And then use some of these things that we've talked about, like journaling, like gratitude lists, like surrounding yourself with positive people to tip your ratio and see what impact those have. So for those of you who like data, this is quite a good way of providing that data for yourself or your team. Helen, I like your comment. This is refreshing from Fredrickson. A lot of positivity gurus I find quite over the top in terms of being happy clappy. Yep, she isn't happy clappy. She's quite down to earth, and I think gives some very sort of practical applications. Lindsay and I did her positivity course. It's a 6-week or 6-program course that is now free online. And part of that, what she talks about is, being positive is not an intellectual exercise. It's something that you actually have to, A, make a bit of effort to do, but B, actually live. So she's quite, the implication is similar to yours, Helen, that a lot of positivity stuff is about understanding it kind of in an intellectual way and lots of kind of nice to do things, whereas I think she's quite practical. And then Jude is saying, can we change our state by changing our body position? That is absolutely true. So there's a lot of research that says just smiling, even if it's not a genuine smile, will send signals to your brain that say you are in a better mood, and it will start to change the chemical compounds in your brain and body and make you feel better. And certainly things like exercise, like just moving, all kind of send those signals to the brain. So I think some of the most interesting work that's been done here that we've talked about before is, I'm sorry, Lindsay, I didn't give you this link, is Amy Cuddy's work on power poses. So what she's shown is that if you adopt a confident, positive posture, then the chemicals in your brain, it releases more testosterone and serotonin, and you become more positive in the way you interact with the world. So lots of great comments here. So I think Guy's talking about some of this came out in terms of organizations in the great companies, great company to work for, work. People talking about gratitude lists. So someone saying here, for me, yesterday was a grateful day that the sun shone, that my husband cooked dinner, and that a piece of work went well. Exactly. These don't have to be huge things. It's the little things that make a lot of difference. Your 5 a day, if you like. I love these things. I'm grateful for my hot shower, my parking space, my hot cup of tea whilst I'm listening to Jan. Thank you. That's really lovely. And Lindsay's put the Amy Cuddy link up there. So the benefits of positivity then are you get a wider breadth of perception. You see the bigger picture. And I think for organizations going through change, that's quite important. Or just trying to get people to understand their strategy, that's important. You're more open to change and learning. So something to really think about in your learning programs. How positive are you creating a culture there? You solve more problems through insight. So Young Beeman's work, Mark Young Beeman, has shown that people in a positive mood are much more likely to have those aha moments and to solve problems that way. You make more connections between disparate pieces of information and situations, so you're much less likely to be kind of caught on the hop. And you reach out to others and are more open to people outside of your in-group. And Fredrickson has some interesting research that says you notice less racial bias when you're positive. So we all have a racial bias. We notice our own race people before we notice people from other races, but that bias seems to all but disappear when we're in a positive mood. People are talking here about both Amy Cuddy and Barbara Fredrickson's great TED Talk, and we've got the links up here for these TED Talks, and we'll follow up with those in our follow-up email. But one of the things I wanted to talk about is what's going on in organizations. So your poll came out quite well in terms of threat-based emotions in organizations, but that's not the experience we often hear. So to tell a little story, we run a face-to-face version of this Breakfast Club as well. Sorry, Angela, I can see that simplifies racial bias. What I'm quoting is the research, and at a base level, that is something that happens in our brain. We know we notice our own race more quickly than we notice the race of other people. And positivity is one way of diminishing that bias. I think that is quite factual. Happy to send you the research if you'd like to see that. So back to negative emotions. So, you know, one of the things that we experience is clients actually believing that the negativity, the threat, if you like, in their organizations makes people work harder and makes them perform better. And I think we're that's quite a hard, if you've got an organization that's based on that and you've got a lot of senior leadership who believe that, that can be quite difficult. So let's just see what you guys think about that. I think we've got another poll here. Yeah, so how would you rate your organization on fear? So there's been quite a lot of research recently about what's called a fear index. So these are the types of things that have been found in organizations that have quite a kind of fear-based or a threat-based culture. Can we make this a bit bigger, please? Liz, can we make this a bit bigger? I don't know how to do that. Oh, yes, I do. So, there, Jan. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, what's going on in your organization? So, got a lot of people saying executives have favorites. People are expected to follow the exact process. There's quite a lot of politicking. These are all things that have been found to be elements in us, the fear index, if you like, a threat-based culture. Yeah, so quite a lot of those, less about turnover, less about do all ideas for change come from the top, and fiefdoms. But so, think about some of that and some of those elements in your culture. So even if you voted earlier that you've got a pretty positive emotion, these types of things can over kind of whelm those positive emotions and make people experience that sense of fear. So some of the emotions that are behind this poll. And what we're beginning to see, I just wanted to bring your attention to two fairly recent books that have come out that I think are beginning a movement to create fear-free organizations. I mean, that's their mission. So the first one, the Fear-Free Organization, is written by a neuroscientist and a couple of oil company executives, and really looks at what's the neuroscience of fear and how could you create a culture that uses our understanding of the brain to create a more positive organization. It's got a really horrible chapter on HR, which is pretty unpleasant if you're an HR professional, like most of the people on this call. But apart from that, I'd say it's a really interesting book. The other one, which is getting quite a lot of publicity, is Reinventing Organizations. And this is much more of a research-based book. So the author went and looked around the world for organizations that have adopted a fear-free culture, so one that's much more about connection and democracy, almost people working together, kind of leaderless-led teams, that sort of thing, and actually charted, how organizations have done that, what are some of the common kind of principles and leadership methodologies that they've used, and that quite a lot of the book is about how can you introduce those things yourself, and particularly what are the HR processes and approaches and policies that you would have if you had a fear-free organization. So two very interesting, I think, and complementary books. There's also a very good summary of the Reinventing Organizations one, and a number of videos from the author are on his website. I think I gave you those, Lindsay.
Yeah,
pop those up,
Jen.
Yeah, so if you haven't got time to read the whole book, read his summary, but and then if you're still interested, go back and have a look at some of the how-tos. And the other thing that's going, oops, there's our poll. The other thing that's going on is this group that I found called World Blue, which call themselves freedom-centered workplaces, but they're actually doing exactly the same thing. So they're finding organizations around the world that are attempting to be fear-free, and they think about this as being democratic or giving people freedom to bring their whole self to work and to contribute more completely to work. And they have a number of awards for organizations and all around the world, but there are some quite interesting organizations. So DW40 is on there, for example, that stuff that you put on your locks when they're creaking. And they also provide kind of help and consulting to organizations and run a leadership program on how to lead in this fear-free or democratic manner. So I think this is a kind of interesting trend that we're beginning to see. And in the last few minutes that we've got, I'd be quite interested in people's getting some input from people on, are they seeing similar moves in their organization to tip that negativity bias and have a much more kind of focus on the positive and particularly the people connection. I was talking, as I say, yesterday at a CIPD conference with someone from Thomson Reuters, and they're just beginning to look at how they encourage people to bring their whole self to work. And that exercise that I got people to do as understanding your kind of positive behaviors or positive emotions and the behaviors they bring are one of the exercises they do with their people. So I think this is early days, but I think for HR it's quite an interesting trend because we are the custodians really of our organizations, people, policies and practices, and this goes to the heart of them. So we've got Bernadette saying we do a lot around well-being and staff engagement, and I think that's part of this, and I think we may begin to see some of this creep into the engagement world. That's certainly one of the outcomes that World Blue have shown. And they've looked at also some of the actual growth rates of their companies compared to their American, so compared to the S&P 500. And you can see that it's many multiple times higher. They also looked at the survival rates of their, as they call them, World Blue companies in the recession, and they're something like 4 times more likely to have survived the recession than other companies. So people saying they're doing a lot about engagement. Helen, interestingly, saying the whole organization is democratic, but we're unusual in the workplace. Helen, be really interested to hear some more about that and how that works and who you work for. And we've got Fran saying working on building a networked organization, some very similar concepts there. And some of the inspiration coming from Reinventing Organizations book. We're doing more on engagement, looking after the heart of our business and our people. Lovely term there. Rachel saying the trick is resilience. Well, I think resilience is one of the ways in that organizations are getting to some of this stuff, because it's really at the heart of resilience. I don't think you can be a resilient person or have a resilient organization unless you tip that negativity bias. And Haley saying we're focusing on making it a great place to work by looking at what already works well. Yeah, taking an appreciative inquiry approach to that. Very interesting. I know, Haley, you're in the civil service, so that is extremely interesting given some of the challenges you have. And Heather saying we display a success register. That's a lovely idea, which really helps teams to think about what they're doing well. That's a really good idea. Thank you for that one. And Jude's saying they've done a lot around adopting a coaching approach, a positive coaching approach in their leadership style. So quite a lot of interesting stuff going on there, and some good ideas to share here, I think. And I think that's a lot about it, is what are as we saw with Barbara Fredrickson, a little nudges go a long way. So making, how in HR can we make those nudges in our own organizations? So we've got 1 minute to go here. So just in summary, for an organization that's fear free and has positivity, think about some of these things. Celebrate success. Help people to really notice the positives that are going on in the organization. So some of those things coming out in your comments. Have a clear sense of purpose. That's one thing we haven't mentioned, but those World Blue organizations tend to have very clear purpose that goes beyond profit. People are well connected. There's people are encouraged to learn and take risks, and there's an openness to new ideas. Yeah, we've got Abigail here saying with looking at playing with strengths in development conversations also helps definitely. And Martin saying we have a recognition and reward policy in government departments to work out. We work in, however, you do still see variations. Yeah, and I think one of the things with this is you have to kind of keep going, because people will have the habit of noticing the negative, and you've got to tip that, help people have a better chance of noticing the positive and helping each other be more positive. So using that contagion positively. And Lindsay has put up our pay compliment feedback link. So if you've enjoyed this webinar, please do either on Liz's link or ours. I'm sure Liz will do hers in a minute. Do give us some feedback. Thank you all for your great comments. I hope you found it useful, and I hope you'll join us in our future webinars. There will be an article up on the site summarizing some of this with links to the research in, and there will also be a webinar distributed later on in the week. So thanks again, everyone, and lovely to see you all.
Thanks, Jan. Just going to scroll through a few slides here.
Oh, sorry. I've got some of my...
Lovely.
There you go.
That was brilliant. Thank you ever so much. Lots of useful, positive sort of things to take away there. So, and there's fabulous engagement on that chat. Some really useful comments that came through. Really, as Jan said, there's a link up there for the Pay Compliment website to leave some feedback about how you thought it or any ideas for further webinars that you might have. Just to let you know, the next event will be on the 27th of October, and Jan's going to talk about making better decisions then within your business. So please join us next month on the 27th of October, and yeah, I think Mike absolutely mirror that. It's a very positive start to the day. Brilliant. Thank you. Oh, very good.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your day.
Lovely. Let's wait for the comments to finish coming through.